Hey everyone and welcome. Today's deep dive is kind of mind-blowing, honestly. We're talking artificial intelligence in Africa.
And I know we hear that phrase AI everywhere these days, but trust me on this. We're going way beyond the hype. We're digging into real stories, the potential, the challenges, the whole shebang. Our main guide for this journey is a recent Financial Times article, and let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
It really digs into how AI could help bridge that huge development gap, but it also doesn't shy away from the potential downsides. Like right off the bat, they tell this story about a barber in Ghana, Oscar Darko Sarfo. His experience just grabbed me. I don't know, it made this whole AI thing feel so much more real and immediate.
Yeah, Oscar's story is a powerful example of how AI can have a real, tangible impact, even at an individual level. He uses this program, Google's Project Relate.
And it transcribes his speech in real time and helps him communicate more easily with his customers, which is incredible when you think about it.
It really makes you realize how something we take for granted, being able to clearly understand each other, it can be a huge barrier for some people. And here comes AI to break down that barrier.
Exactly. And the article argues that this is just the beginning.
So what else did you find like super fascinating about the potential of AI in Africa?
Well, one concept that really jumped out was this idea of leapfrogging.
Leapfrogging.
Yeah, like using AI to help Africa essentially bypass traditional development stages, much like what happened with the mobile phones, you know?
Oh, right, right. Skipping ahead.
Exactly. And the article uses healthcare as a prime example. They talk about AI-powered ultrasound analysis, for instance. Imagine that, being able to assist healthcare workers in areas with limited access to, trained medical personnel.
Wow, that's incredible. And what about education? Do they talk about the impact on education at all?
Absolutely. They talk about the potential of AI to create interactive learning materials in all sorts of local languages.
Oh, wow.
And considering how linguistically diverse the African continent is, this could be huge. Like, seriously game-changing for education.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so this leapfrogging idea, it's pretty exciting, but the article doesn't just paint a rosy picture, does it?
One thing that kind of stuck with me was this underlying concern about Africa potentially becoming even more reliant on technology that's well developed elsewhere.
You're hitting on a really crucial point there.
The article highlights that less than 0.5%, less than half of 1% of machine learning models are actually produced in Africa.
Whoa.
So that raises some big questions about control, ownership, even the potential for new kinds of digital dependencies on more developed nations,
So instead of bridging the gap, there's this risk of actually widening it.
creating a new kind of digital divide almost.
That's the fear that some experts express. Yeah. And it's not just about, who's developing the technology, but also about how it's implemented, like who
Yeah.
ultimately benefits from its application.
Yeah, and it's not always intentional.
Yeah.
It's not always about some malicious intent to like keep Africa down or anything like that.
Right, right.
It's often just a matter of like priorities, the perspectives,
Yeah.
and like the article said, the technologies themselves might be neutral,
Okay.
but the way they're developed, the way they're implemented,
Mm-hmm.
that's where things can get a little,
Dicier?
dicier. That's the word. Like they give this example of AI-powered weather forecasting.
Okay, so we've got like super accurate forecasts now.
Oh yeah, way better than the old methods, apparently.
So what's the problem? If the information's that good,
Ah, see, that's the thing, isn't it?
what is it?
It's getting that information, that gold mine of data, into the hands of the farmers who actually need it
Yeah.
and in a way that they can use.
Oh, right.
Otherwise, it's just like digital dust.
It's like they say, you can lead a horse to water.
Exactly. You can have the most amazing AI telling you exactly when to plant, when to harvest.
Right.
But if the farmer doesn't get that information or doesn't understand it or can't even access it because they don't have a smartphone.
It's useless.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is where this idea of the interface comes in.
The interface.
Yeah, like bridging the gap between all this fancy AI stuff and the actual realities on the ground in Africa.
So it's more than just a technology problem then, huh?
Oh, way more. It's about understanding local contexts.
Cultures, languages.
All of it. Like they talk about this program in Ethiopia, SkillBridge, I think it was called.
Yeah, I remember that.
Uses AI tutoring to help students prepare for their university entrance exams.
Oh, right. And those are like notoriously difficult, right?
Yeah, the article said something like only a tiny percentage actually pass.
Ah, wild.
So there's a huge need for support,
Yeah.
right? And AI can play a role, definitely, but it's not enough to just have like a generic AI tutor.
It needs to be localized. Exactly. Delivered in the languages students understand best, addressing the specific challenges they face.
So it's a tool, but you got to use it carefully.
Oh, absolutely. Like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
Love that analogy. So how do we make sure that happens, though? This careful implementation, I mean.
Well, that's where I think the article makes a really important point about local involvement.
Right, right. Having people from Africa involved in developing these technologies.
Exactly. Because who better to understand those nuances we were just talking about? Who better to make sure that the technology actually benefits the people it's intended to help?
Which brings us back to that AI divide thing, right? If most of the development is happening elsewhere, aren't we just going to see those inequalities get worse?
It's a real concern, for sure. And like we said, the article highlights that Africans produce less than half of 1% of machine learning models.
Less than half of 1%. It's crazy to think about.
It is, and it makes you wonder if the majority of AI development is happening, in Silicon Valley or wherever, driven by their priorities, their worldview.
Is it really going to serve Africa's best interests?
Right. It's like, are we going to end up with solutions that might look good on paper but don't actually address the real needs on the ground?
Exactly. And let's not forget about the whole language thing.
Oh, right.
The article talked about how Africa's incredible linguistic diversity could actually be a barrier if all the AI development is focused on English or a handful of other dominant languages.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like a catch-22 almost, isn't it?
Totally. Like, you need diverse data to train AI models for all those different languages.
Right.
But if you don't have the data, because nobody's developing AI for those languages.
Then those languages get left behind. It's a vicious cycle.
Exactly. But the article did mention some projects trying to tackle this, right?
Yeah, there are some really cool initiatives out there. Like they talked about Common Voice, for example.
Oh, yeah, that one stuck with me. How does that work again?
So it's this whole crowdsourcing thing, right?
Okay.
People can contribute voice recordings in their native language, and it doesn't even matter if it's some super rare language,
Wow, so they're like building this massive library of different languages that AI can learn from.
Exactly. It's like a digital Rosetta Stone or something. And that opens up so many possibilities. I mean, imagine speech recognition, translation tools, even educational software, all in languages that were previously excluded.
That's really incredible when you think about it. Like, we often talk about the digital divide in terms of access to technology and the internet.
Right.
But this is like a whole other level. It's about making sure that AI itself is inclusive.
Yeah.
That it reflects the diversity of human language and culture.
Totally. And I think what's really powerful about initiatives like Common Voice is that they're not coming from Silicon Valley,
Right.
They're being driven by people within Africa who see the need and are taking action themselves.
Instead of waiting for someone else to come up with a solution.
Exactly. It's about ownership, shaping the technology to fit their own needs and priorities.
I love that. Taking control of the narrative, so to speak.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, honestly. So much to think about when it comes to AI's role in Africa's future. We've covered a lot of ground here. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that AI in Africa is not a done deal. It's not some inevitable future that's already been decided. It's a story that's still being written, and the choices that are made today by people in Africa and beyond will determine whether it's a story of progress and empowerment or one of further division and inequality.
A powerful thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. I've learned so much, and I know our listeners have too. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep an eye on the ever-evolving world of AI.